The Wyoming winter of 1882 arrived with the fury of a wounded beast, howling through the valleys and laying siege to every homestead foolish enough to stand in its path. Snow fell in thick curtains that blotted out the sun for days at a time, piling against cabin walls until windows became dark caves. The wind cut through wool and leather like a skinning knife, and even the hardiest cattle huddled together in whatever shelter they could find, their breath forming clouds that froze instantly in the bitter air. Elias Hartwell stood at the edge of his porch, squinting into the white fury that had swallowed his land. Ice crystals clung to his dark beard, and his weathered hands gripped a Winchester rifle out of habit more than necessity. At 34, he looked older, carved lean and hard by grief and the unforgiving landscape. The small ranch house behind him creaked under the wind's assault, a lonely sentinel against the storm. It had been exactly 1 year since the fever took Mary and little Samuel. 1 year since he dug their graves in the frozen earth with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. The house still smelled of her lavender sachets in the drawers, and sometimes he swore he could hear Sam's laughter echoing from the empty bedroom. But these were ghosts, and Elias had learned to live with ghosts. The sound of horses broke through his reverie, unexpected in this weather. Through the swirling snow, he made out a wagon struggling up the rutted track that passed for a road. The driver, bundled beyond recognition, fought to keep the team moving forward. Elias frowned. No one traveled in weather like this unless driven by desperation or madness. He stepped off the porch, rifle loose in his hands, and waited. The wagon lurched to a stop 20 feet away, the horses stamping and blowing steam. The driver climbed down stiffly, and Elias recognized Tom McKay from town, though the man's face was nearly blue with cold. "Hartwell," Tom called over the wind. "Got a delivery for you." "Wasn't expecting anything," Elias replied, not moving closer. Tom gestured to the wagon bed. "Well, you got it anyway. Lady here says she's supposed to be for you." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "What kind of fool joke is this, McKay?" "No joke." Tom was already moving to the back of the wagon, eager to be done with his strange cargo. "Got paid good money to bring her out here. There's a letter explains it all." From beneath the canvas covering, a figure emerged. She was wrapped in a dark traveling cloak, the hood pulled forward to shield her face from the wind. When she climbed down from the wagon, refusing Tom's offered hand, Elias caught a glimpse of auburn hair and pale skin. She moved carefully, as if the ground might give way beneath her feet, clutching a small carpetbag against her chest. Tom thrust an envelope at Elias. "Here's your letter. I done my part." He was already climbing back onto the wagon seat. "Ma'am." He tipped his hat to the woman, then snapped the reins. The wagon lurched away, leaving deep tracks that the snow immediately began to fill. Elias stood there, letter in one hand, rifle in the other, staring at the woman who stood in his yard like some fever dream. She raised her head then, and he saw her face clearly for the first time. Beautiful. Yes, but it was the wariness in her green eyes that struck him, the look of a deer that knows it's being hunted. "Mr. Hartwell," her voice was cultured, Eastern, entirely out of place in this wilderness. "I'm Rosalind Blake. I believe you're expecting me." "I'm not expecting anyone. Miss Blake." She gestured to the letter. "Perhaps that will explain." Elias broke the seal with his thumb, keeping one eye on her. The message inside was brief, written in a bold hand. "Elias, consider this a gift you deserve but would never seek for yourself. The lady is in need of a home, and you are in need of a wife. I trust you will treat her with the kindness I know you possess. Ask no questions of her past. It is buried where it belongs. A friend." He read it twice, anger building with each word. "I don't know who sent you, ma'am, but there's been a mistake. I'm not looking for a wife." The wind gusted, and she swayed slightly. Her lips were turning blue. I understand. If you could perhaps direct me to town, I'll find lodging there. Town's 15 miles back the way you came. In this weather, you wouldn't make it 5. They stood there in the swirling snow, locked in an impossible situation. Elias could see her trembling despite her efforts to hide it. Whatever else she was cold and alone, and sending her back into the storm would be murder. "You'll stay the night," he said gruffly. "Tomorrow, when the weather clears, we'll sort this out." Relief flickered across her features before the wariness returned. "I don't wish to impose. You'll freeze to death wishing. Come inside." He turned and walked to the house, not waiting to see if she followed. After a moment, he heard her footsteps crunching in the snow behind him. The main room was sparse but warm, the fire in the stone hearth casting dancing shadows on the walls. Mary's rocking chair still sat in the corner, her sewing basket beside it, untouched. Rosalind stood just inside the door, dripping melting snow onto the floorboards. In the firelight, he could see her more clearly. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25, with fine features that spoke of comfortable living. Her traveling dress, though practical, was well made. Everything about her seemed to belong in a Boston parlor, not a Wyoming ranch house. "You can hang your cloak there," he said, gesturing to the pegs by the door. "I'll heat some coffee." She hesitated before removing the cloak, revealing a slender figure in dark blue wool. The way she clutched that carpet bag, knuckles white, told him more than words could. Whatever had brought her here, fear was part of it. While the coffee heated, Elias added wood to the fire and tried to make sense of the situation. Someone had sent him a mail-order bride without his knowledge or consent. The letter's warning about her past raised more questions than it answered. And the woman herself, clearly educated, refined, what was she doing allowing herself to be shipped like freight to a stranger? "Mr. Hartwell," she said quietly, still standing near the door. "I should explain. No need." He cut her off, remembering the letter's instruction. "Your business is your own. You'll sleep in the back room tonight. It was my son's room. The bed's small but clean." Something shifted in her expression at the mention of his son, but she only nodded. "Thank you." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed her one. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she jerked back as if burned, nearly dropping the cup. Coffee sloshed onto the floor. "I'm sorry," she breathed, setting the cup on the table with shaking hands. I'm sorry." Elias studied her, noting the shadows under her eyes, the way she kept glancing at the windows as if expecting something or someone to appear. He'd seen that look before, on men who'd survived Indian raids or watched their companions die in blizzards. It was the look of someone who'd learned that safety was always temporary. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. She blinked at the change of subject.
Yesterday, I think perhaps the day before."
He moved to the larder, pulled out bread and dried beef. As he prepared a simple meal, she finally sat, perched on the edge of a chair as if ready to flee. The carpet bag never left her lap. They ate in silence, the wind howling around the walls like wolves. When she finished, she looked up at him with those haunted green eyes.
"Why did you let me stay?"
Elias considered the question. "Man doesn't turn a woman out into a killing storm. Whatever else I might be, I'm not a murderer." She flinched at the word, and he filed that reaction away. After a moment, she asked, "Your wife?"
"Dead, year ago, along with our boy. Fever took them. I'm sorry for your loss."
He shrugged, the gesture encompassing a year of emptiness.
"Life out here takes more than it gives. You learn to accept it or it breaks you."
She absorbed this, then surprised him by saying, "I suppose we're both broken in our own ways, Mr. Hartwell." Before he could respond, she stood, still clutching her bag. "If you could show me to the room." He led her down the short hallway to Sam's room. Everything was as it had been, the small bed with its quilt Mary had sewn, the wooden horse Elias had carved, the child's clothes still folded in the drawer. He should have packed it all away months ago, but couldn't bring himself to erase these last traces. Rosalind took it all in with a glance that seemed to understand too much. "Thank you," she said simply. He left her there, closing the door softly. Back in the main room, he sat before the fire and pulled out the letter again, studying the unfamiliar handwriting. Who would do this? And why? The postmark was smudged beyond reading, offering no clues. From the back room, he heard movement, then what sounded like muffled crying. He stared at the closed door, torn between the urge to comfort and the stronger instinct to maintain distance. He'd built walls around himself this past year, thick as the snow outside. This woman, with her secrets and her fear, threatened those defenses in ways he couldn't yet understand. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them together in this small space. Come morning, he'd take her to town, despite what the letter said. He wasn't in the market for a wife, especially one who jumped at shadows and cried in the night. But as he sat there, listening to the wind and the distant sound of her grief, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that morning would bring complications he wasn't prepared for. The stranger who'd sent Rosalind Blake to his door had set something in motion, and like an avalanche starting high on a mountain, there would be no stopping it now. The storm broke 3 days later, leaving behind a world transformed by white silence. Elias had expected to take Rosalind to town immediately, but the snow had drifted too deep for safe travel. They settled into an uneasy routine, two strangers circling each other in the small space like wary animals. Rosalind proved herself useful from the start. That first morning, he'd found her already awake, the fire rebuilt and coffee brewing. She'd located his meager supplies and fashioned a breakfast of biscuits and gravy that reminded him painfully of Mary's cooking, though the techniques were different, more refined. "I hope you don't mind," she said when he emerged from his room. "I couldn't sleep, and I thought, well, I should earn my keep." He grunted acknowledgement, unsure how to respond to this unexpected domesticity. They ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of forks on tin plates and the settling of logs in the fireplace. As days passed, they developed a rhythm of avoidance. Elias would rise early to tend the stock, breaking ice on water troughs and forking hay to the horses and the few cattle he kept close to the barn. When he returned, the house would be warm and clean, something cooking on the stove. Rosalind moved through the space like a ghost, always stepping aside when he entered a room, never meeting his eyes directly. She'd found Mary's aprons and wore them while she worked, though they hung loose on her smaller frame. The sight of another woman in his wife's clothes should have angered him, but instead, it stirred something he'd thought frozen solid, a loneliness so deep he'd forgotten he was drowning in it. On the fourth day, he found her in the barn, talking softly to his mare. Buttercup, the horse, normally skittish with strangers, stood placidly while Rosalind stroked her neck. "You have a way with horses," he observed. She startled, spinning around with that now familiar look of fear before relaxing slightly. "We had horses when I was young. Before," she trailed off, biting her lip. "Before what?" "Before things changed." She turned back to Buttercup, effectively ending the conversation. That evening, the temperature plummeted. Even with the fire roaring, cold seeped through every crack and gap in the walls. Elias noticed Rosalind shivering as she cleared the dinner plates, though she tried to hide it. "There are extra blankets in the chest," he told her. "Take what you need." "I'm fine, thank you." But later, passing by Sam's room, he heard her teeth chattering. Without thinking, he grabbed the heavy buffalo robe from his own bed and knocked on her door. "Miss Blake?" A pause, then, "Yes? I'm leaving something outside your door. The cold's worse tonight." He set down the robe and retreated. A moment later, the door opened a crack. In the dim light, he saw her face, pale and drawn. She looked at the buffalo robe, then up at him. "This is yours," she said. "I can't—" "You can and you will. No sense in you freezing when there's warmth to be had." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, at this small kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Hartwell." As she reached for the robe, her sleeve pulled back, revealing dark bruises on her wrist in the shape of fingers. She saw him notice and quickly covered them again, but not before he glimpsed older marks, yellow-green with healing. They stood frozen for a moment, the truth hanging between them unspoken. Then she pulled the robe inside and closed the door with a soft click. Elias returned to his room but couldn't sleep. Those bruises told a story he'd suspected but hadn't wanted to confirm. Someone had hurt her badly enough that she'd fled to the frontier, accepting marriage to a stranger as escape. The letter's warning about her past took on new meaning. The next morning brought a new development. Rosalind had found Mary's sewing basket and was mending one of his shirts, her needle moving in precise, elegant stitches. She'd also discovered the pile of Sam's clothes he'd been meaning to repair, small tears and lost buttons he couldn't bring himself to fix. "Do you mind?" she asked, gesturing to the child's garments. "It seems wasteful to let good cloth go unused." He should have said yes, should have snatched them away and buried them with all the other reminders. Instead, he heard himself saying, he was 4, would have been 5 come spring. Her hands stilled on the fabric. "Tell me about him." So he did, surprising himself. How Sam had been born during a March blizzard worse than this one. How he'd taken his first steps chasing a chicken across the yard. His laugh that could fill the whole house. The way he'd followed Elias everywhere. Determined to be a rancher like his PA. "He sounds wonderful," Rosalind said softly when he finished. "You were blessed to have him, even for so short a time." "Blessed?" The word came out bitter. "That's what the preacher said, that God needed another angel. I wanted to hit him, but you didn't. Mary wouldn't have liked it." She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she might have been before fear carved itself into her features. "She sounds like a wise woman?" She was. He stood abruptly, uncomfortable with how easily this stranger had gotten him talking. "I need to check the stock." Outside, he stood in the bitter wind and tried to sort through his tangled thoughts. In just a few days, Rosalind Blake had disturbed the careful emptiness he'd cultivated. She moved through his space, touching things, changing things, making the house feel alive again. It wasn't right. It wasn't what he wanted. Was it? That night, he woke to the sound of crying, not the muffled sobs he'd heard before, but full-throated terror. He was at her door before fully awake, hand raised to knock, when he heard her voice. "No, please, I won't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." A nightmare. He stood there, torn. Mary had suffered bad dreams sometimes, and he'd learned to wake her gently, hold her until the shaking stopped. But Rosalind wasn't Mary, wasn't his wife, wasn't his anything. The crying intensified, and his resolve crumbled. He knocked softly. "Miss Blake, Rosalind." The sound stopped abruptly. After a moment, her voice came, thick with sleep and fear. "Mr. Hartwell, you are having a nightmare. Are you all right?" Silence. Then the door opened, and she stood there in Mary's old nightgown, her hair wild around her shoulders, that damned carpetbag clutched to her chest. In the moonlight from the window, he could see tears on her cheeks. "I'm sorry I woke you," she whispered. "You didn't—" He stopped, seeing how she trembled. Without thinking, he reached out, meaning to steady her. She flinched back so violently she hit the door frame. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Easy." He kept his voice low, the tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you." She laughed then, a broken sound. That's what he always said, right before— "Before what?" She shook her head, backing into the room, but something had broken loose in her, and the words spilled out. "Before he reminded me who I belonged to, before he showed me what happened to wives who disappointed their husbands, before—" She choked off the words, pressing a hand to her mouth. Elias felt rage build in his chest, hot and familiar. He'd felt it when rustlers had taken his cattle, when a wolf had gotten into the chicken coop, when the fever had taken his family. But this was different, directed at a faceless man who'd driven this woman to flee across a continent. "He's not here," he said firmly. "Whatever he did, whoever he was, he's not here. You're safe." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw her trying to decide whether to believe him. Finally, she nodded slightly. Would you sit for a moment? She gestured to the chair by the window. Just until I don't want to be alone. He sat, maintaining careful distance while she perched on the edge of the bed. The carpet bag remained in her lap, her fingers worrying at the worn fabric. What's in the bag? He asked gently. Her knuckles whitened on the handles. Proof, she whispered. Evidence of what he did, in case anyone comes looking. Are they likely to? I don't know. He was an important man, connected, but I couldn't. One more night and I think he would have killed me, or I would have. She trailed off. They sat in silence while the moon tracked across the sky. Gradually, her breathing evened out. When he thought she might be ready, he stood carefully. Try to sleep, he said. Nothing's going to hurt you tonight. How can you be sure? He met her eyes steadily. Because I'll make sure of it. Something passed between them in that moment, not attraction, not yet, but understanding. They were both broken, both haunted, both trying to find a way to keep living when life had taken too much. As he reached the door, she called softly. Elias. It was the first time she'd used his given name? Yes. Thank you for not asking for more than I can tell. He nodded and left her there, but he didn't return to his room. Instead, he sat by the fire with his rifle across his knees, watching the windows and listening to the night. If trouble came looking for Rosalind Blake, it would find him ready. The wind had finally died, and in the profound silence of the Wyoming night, he admitted what he'd been fighting since she'd arrived. He didn't want to take her to town anymore. This house had been a tomb for a year, and somehow, this frightened woman with her secrets and her sorrow had brought something back to life in it. Maybe in him too. But morning would come, and with it, decisions that couldn't be unmade. For now, though, he kept watch while she slept, guardian to a woman who wasn't his wife, in a house that was learning to be a home again. The blizzard arrived without warning on their second week together, a wall of white fury that slammed into the ranch with the force of a freight train. Elias had seen the signs, the restless cattle, the strange yellow tinge to the clouds, but hadn't expected it to hit so fast or so hard. He'd been in the barn when it struck, barely making it back to the house through the sudden whiteout. Rosalind met him at the door, her face tight with worry as she helped him out of his ice-crusted coat. The animals? She asked. Secured as best I could. We're in for a long blow. She nodded, already moving to heat water for coffee. They'd developed an efficient partnership over the past days, communicating in glances and gestures more than words. Now, facing what could be days trapped together, that careful distance seemed harder to maintain. By nightfall, the wind howled like a living thing, and snow had drifted halfway up the windows. They ate a simple supper of beans and cornbread, the lamplight creating a small circle of warmth against the darkness pressing in from all sides. I've seen storms before, Rosalind said, breaking their usual mealtime silence. But nothing like this. Wyoming doesn't do anything by halves. Elias replied. This could last 3 days, maybe 4. Something flickered in her eyes, not quite fear, but close to it. The thought of being trapped, even with him, clearly unsettled her. He understood. Since that night, he'd comforted her nightmare. They'd maintained a careful balance, close enough for necessity, distant enough for propriety. The first day passed quietly. They went about their usual tasks, though the howling wind made conversation difficult. By the second day, the enforced proximity began to wear on them both. The house, already small, seemed to shrink with each hour. Rosalind had taken to writing in what looked like a journal, bent over the kitchen table with ink-stained fingers. Elias tried not to watch her, but found his eyes drawn to the way she bit her lip when concentrating, the delicate movement of her hand across the page. On the evening of the second day, the cold intensified. Despite the roaring fire, ice formed on the inside of the windows. They moved their chairs closer to the hearth, still maintaining that invisible boundary between them. "May I ask you something?" Rosalind said suddenly. He looked up from the harness he was mending. "Go ahead. Why did you stay out here? After your loss, most men would have sold up, gone to town or back east." Elias considered the question, his hands still on the leather. "This land, it's all I have left of them. Mary loved the view of the mountains from the kitchen window. Sam took his first steps right there by the door. Leaving would be like losing them all over again." She nodded slowly. "I understand. Sometimes places hold memories better than we do." "What about you?" He surprised himself by asking, "What made you leave?" Her fingers tightened on her journal. "Survival," she said simply. "Sometimes staying is the real danger." They lapsed back into silence. But it was different now, less wary. The storm raged on, sealing them in their small world of firelight and shadow. On the third day, they woke to find the door completely blocked by snow. The windows showed nothing but white. Even the sound of the wind was muffled now, creating an eerie quiet that was somehow worse than the howling. "We're buried," Rosalind said, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "Not buried," Elias corrected calmly. "Snowed in. There's a difference. We have food, fuel, water. We waited out." But he saw how her hands shook as she prepared breakfast, how her eyes kept darting to the blocked door. Being trapped was triggering memories he could only guess at. That afternoon, to distract them both, he brought out a battered deck of cards. "Do you play?" A small smile crossed her face. "My father taught me poker when I was 12. Mother was scandalized." They played for dried beans, and Elias quickly learned that Rosalind's refined appearance hid a sharp card player. She won hand after hand, her pile of beans growing while his dwindled. "You're cheating," he accused after she laid down another winning hand. "Prove it," she challenged, and for a moment, her eyes sparkled with mischief rather than fear. He couldn't, of course, and they both knew it, but the tension had broken, and they found themselves actually talking as they played. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her father's shipping business, about learning to ride in a proper English saddle. "What happened to your family?" he asked carefully. The light dimmed in her eyes. "Father died when I was 19. Bad investments, debts. Mother followed within the year. Broken heart. The doctor said I had no brothers, no close relatives. Just an uncle who arranged my marriage to settle the remaining debts." "Arranged?" She dealt the cards with steady hands. "Sold would be more accurate. To a business associate who'd always admired me. Theodore Blackwood. He seemed charming at first, wealthy, cultured. I thought myself fortunate." Elias waited, sensing more coming. "The charm lasted exactly until our wedding night," she continued quietly. "Then I learned what I really was to him. A possession, a thing to own and control, and—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I endured it for 2 years. 2 years of being careful not to speak wrong, look wrong, breathe wrong. 2 years of walking on glass." "What changed?" She met his eyes directly. He started talking about children, about his legacy, and I knew any child of mine would either become like him or be destroyed by him. So I started planning. "Oh, the bag," Elias said, understanding. "Letters, documents, a journal detailing everything, hidden bit by bit over months. Then, 3 months ago, there was a party. He drank more than usual, became violent, worse than before. When he finally passed out, I took what I'd hidden and ran. I had some money saved, enough to get me away." "How did you end up here?" She smiled bitterly. I was heading for California, somewhere I could disappear, but in St. Louis, I met a man at the boarding house, kind, elderly. He asked about my situation. Somehow he could tell I was running. When I told him I needed to disappear, to find somewhere safe, he said he knew of a good man in Wyoming, a man who'd lost his wife and lived far from anywhere. He arranged everything, said you'd be expecting me. But I wasn't. No, I realize now he never contacted you. He just sent me here.
Hoping. She shrugged. Maybe he thought we could help each other. Two broken people. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the storm seemed to be finally weakening. Elias studied her face in the firelight, seeing not just beauty but strength, the kind forged in surviving what shouldn't be survivable. "You're not broken," he said quietly. "Bent, maybe, scarred, but not broken." Her eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes I feel like I am, like he took something from me I'll never get back." Without thinking, Elias reached across the small space between them and took her hand. She tensed but didn't pull away. "He took enough," Elias said firmly. "Don't give him any more." They sat like that, hands linked, while the fire burned low. Neither spoke, but something shifted in the space between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was dissolving like snow in spring. Finally. Rosalind squeezed his hand gently and stood. "I should get some sleep." But at her bedroom door, she paused. "Elias, that old man in St. Louis, I never got his name. He paid for my passage, gave me traveling money, then disappeared. I've wondered—" "What?" "If he was real at all. Sometimes I think I dreamed him. A guardian angel when I needed one most." After she'd gone to bed, Elias sat thinking, whoever the mysterious benefactor was, real or imagined, he'd brought Rosalind here, to him, and despite all his intentions to remain closed off, to keep his heart as frozen as the land outside, he could feel something thawing. The next morning, they woke to silence. The storm had finally passed. Working together, they managed to clear enough snow from the door to get outside. The world was transformed, pristine, blinding white as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Rosalind breathed, standing beside him on the porch. "And dangerous," he warned. "Snow this deep changes everything. We'll be truly cut off now for at least a week, maybe 2. She looked at him sideways. "Is that such a bad thing?" He met her gaze, saw his own changing feelings reflected there. "No," he admitted. "Maybe it's not." That night, they sat closer to each other by the fire, not touching, but close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used, close enough to see the small scar on her temple that her hair usually hid. When she shivered, he fetched a blanket and draped it around her shoulders, his hands lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she whispered. He knew she meant for more than just the blanket, for his patience, his protection, his growing care, for not being the man she'd fled from, for being, perhaps, the man she'd fled to. The snow had trapped them. Yes, but in that white prison, something else was being set free, something that had nothing to do with the mysterious letter or the stranger's plan, and everything to do with 2 wounded souls finding warmth in the coldest of winters. The snow had melted enough by week's end for Elias to attempt the journey to town. He needed supplies. Coffee, flour, ammunition, but more than that, he needed answers. The mystery of who had sent Rosalind gnawed at him like a splinter under the skin. "I could come with you," Rosalind offered as he prepared to leave that morning. "Best you stay here," he said, seeing the flash of fear in her eyes. "Town folk are good people, but they talk. Until we figure out things, better to keep quiet." She nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying. A woman appearing from nowhere, living with a widower. The gossip would spread like wildfire. "Be careful," she said softly. The ride to Cedar Ridge took 4 hours through the snow-choked trails. The town looked gray and tired under the winter sky, a collection of wooden buildings huddled against the cold. Elias tied his horse outside Morrison's general store and stamped the snow from his boots. "Hartwell." Jim Morrison called from behind the counter. "Haven't seen you in near a month. Beginning to wonder if you'd frozen solid out there." "Takes more than cold to kill me," Elias replied, moving through the store to gather supplies. "Heard you had some excitement," Jim continued, his voice carefully casual. "Tom McKay says he delivered something unusual to your place." Elias kept his face neutral. "Tom talks too much. A woman, he said, pretty one, from back east. Man gets lonely," Elias said simply, hoping that would end it. But Jim wasn't done.
Funny thing, though, Western Union says no telegraph came through about any mail-order bride for you, and Simon at the post office. He doesn't remember any letters. Elias set down a sack of flour harder than necessary. Maybe I made arrangements when I was in Cheyenne last fall. Maybe. Jim's eyes were knowing. Just seems odd, is all. And that letter Tom brought. He said the man who paid him to deliver the lady was strange. Old fellow, well-dressed, paid in gold coins. You see this man? Nope. Tom met him at the stage depot. Said the fellow knew all about you. Though, about Mary and Sam, about the ranch, seemed real concerned you were getting on all right. A chill ran down Elias's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This old man say anything else? Just that he was passing through, heading west. Tom figured him for one of those rich Eastern do-gooders, trying to help folks out. Elias paid for his supplies, his mind churning. As he loaded his saddlebags, Sheriff Ben Cooper approached, his badge glinting in the weak sun. Elias, Ben said, touching his hat brim. Need a word. They stepped away from the main street, into the alley between buildings. Ben was a good man, fair and level-headed, but his expression was serious. Got a wire yesterday from Philadelphia, Ben said quietly. Law back there is looking for a woman, Rosalind Blackwood, née Blake, wife of one Theodore Blackwood. Elias kept his face carefully blank. That's so? Says she disappeared 3 months ago. Might have stolen valuable items. Might be dangerous. Ben studied him carefully. Her husband's offering a substantial reward for information. Must love her something fierce. Elias said dryly. Ben snorted. Man like Blackwood doesn't love anything but his reputation. Word is he's connected. Judges, politicians. But here's the interesting part. He leaned closer. The wire came through normal channels, all proper-like, but this morning I got another message, delivered by hand, no signature. Said Theodore Blackwood died 3 months ago. Night his wife disappeared. Elias felt his blood run cold. Died how? That's the question, isn't it? Official report says natural causes, weak heart, the strain of his wife's disappearance. But the timing... Ben shrugged. Mighty convenient. They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Ben said, I haven't seen any strange women in town. Elias, haven't heard of any either. As far as I'm concerned, that wire from Philadelphia got lost somewhere. Happens sometimes in winter. Appreciate that, Ben. But if I were harboring someone, I'd want to know the truth. Dead men don't send telegraphs or offer rewards. So who's really looking for her? Elias had no answer. They parted ways, and he rode home with his mind full of dark possibilities. The old man who'd arranged Rosalind's escape, had he known Blackwood was dead? Or had he... When he arrived home, he found Rosalind in an unexpected state. She was pacing the main room, her carpet bag open on the table, papers spread across the surface. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. What's wrong? He asked, dropping his supplies by the door. She held up a newspaper, an old one, from the stack he used for kindling. I was looking for something to read, and I found this. It's from September, from Philadelphia. He took the paper, saw the headline, Prominent businessman Theodore Blackwood dead at 42. He's dead, she whispered. He's been dead all this time, and I didn't know. I've been running from a ghost. Elias set down the paper carefully. Maybe not. Sheriff says there's still someone looking for you, offering a reward. Her legs seemed to give out, and she sank into a chair. His brother, Marcus, he always hated that Theodore married me instead of the heiress he'd picked out. If Theodore's dead, she pressed her hands to her face. The will, Theodore always said he'd leave everything to me, just to spite his family. Marcus would do anything to prevent that, including claiming you murdered him? She looked up sharply. What? Elias told her about Ben's warning, about the convenient timing of Blackwood's death. As he spoke, her face went from pale to ashen. I didn't, she said urgently. I swear to you, Elias, I ran, but I didn't. I wanted to sometimes. God help me, I dreamed of it, but I didn't kill him. I believe you.
And he did. Whatever else Rosalind might be. She wasn't a killer. But someone did, and whoever it was helped me, she finished. The old man at the boarding house, he asked so many questions about Theodore, about his health, his habits. I thought he was just being kind, but what if... She began gathering the papers frantically, stuffing them back into the carpet bag. I have to go. If Marcus is looking for me, if he's trying to frame me for murder, I can't stay here. I won't bring that danger to you. Stop! Elias caught her hands, stilling their frantic movement. You're not going anywhere. You don't understand. The Blackwood family has money, influence. They'll have to go through me. The words came out harder than he'd intended, full of a protective fury that surprised him. This is Wyoming territory, not Philadelphia. Different laws out here. Elias. No. He kept hold of her hands, feeling how cold they were. Someone sent you here for a reason. Maybe this old man, maybe someone else. But they sent you to me. And I'm not the kind of man who turns away from trouble. This isn't your fight, isn't it? He pulled her closer, just slightly. You've been living in my house for weeks now, cooking my meals, mending my clothes, making this place feel alive again. You think I'm just going to let someone take that away? She stared up at him, tears streaming down her face. I'm not worth... Don't... He released one hand to cup her cheek gently. Don't you dare tell me what you're worth. I've sat by too many graves, lost too much, to not know value when I see it. She crumbled then, falling against his chest, sobbing like her heart would break. He held her, one hand in her hair, the other rubbing her back, murmuring nonsense comfort words. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world turned liquid. When the storm of tears passed, she pulled back slightly but didn't leave his arms. What are we going to do? First, we're going to look through those papers properly, see if there's anything about the will, about Marcus, about who might want to help you. Then we're going to make sure you're protected legally. And if anyone comes looking for you, he smiled grimly. Well, they'll learn what Wyoming justice looks like. She searched his face. Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. He was quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for the feeling that had been growing in his chest. Maybe I'm selfish, he finally said. Maybe I'm not ready to be alone again. Maybe I look at you and see a chance for something I thought I'd lost forever. Her breath caught. Elias, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you're not ready, maybe never will be, but I'm not letting you face this alone. We'll figure it out together. She nodded, and something shifted in her expression, a tiny spark of hope where there had been only fear. Together, she repeated softly, that night. They spread the contents of her carpetbag across the table, examining each document by lamplight. There were letters from Theodore, early ones full of false charm, later ones increasingly threatening. There were financial documents suggesting embezzlement, fraud, connections to criminal enterprises, and there, at the bottom, was a sealed envelope she'd never opened. It was in Theodore's study, she said. I grabbed it without looking, just knowing it seemed important. Inside was a will, not Theodore's, but an older one, her father's true will, leaving his shipping business to her, not to creditors, and a note in her father's hand, for my daughter, when she needs it most. He hid this. Rosalind breathed. Theodore knew. He married me for a business that should have been mine. Elias felt the pieces clicking together. And if Theodore's dead, and you're legally his widow, I inherit everything, his fortune and my father's. She laughed bitterly. No wonder Marcus wants me dead. But now they had leverage. Now they had truth. And in the morning, they would begin fighting back. For now, though. Elias banked the fire and saw her to her room, pausing at the door. We'll get through this, he promised. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek softly. I'm beginning to believe you. As he lay in his bed that night, Elias thought about the mysterious stranger who'd orchestrated all this. Whoever he was, guardian angel or something darker, He'd set in motion more than an escape. He'd given 2 broken people a chance to heal, to fight, to maybe even love again. And Elias would be damned if he'd waste that chance. The weeks following Elias's discovery passed in a strange state of suspension. They lived each day as if balanced on a knife's edge, waiting for the threat to materialize while trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. The ranch work continued. Animals to feed, fences to mend, the endless battle against winter's grip. But underneath the routine lay a current of tension that pulled them together even as it threatened to tear their fragile peace apart. Rosalind had changed since learning of Theodore's death. The constant fear that had haunted her eyes gave way to a different kind of wariness, not of immediate danger, but of hope itself. She moved through her days with new purpose, helping Elias with the ranch work, learning to handle the horses, even attempting to milk the obstinate cow that had intimidated her at first. "You're getting good at that," Elias observed one morning, watching her gentle hands coax milk into the pail. "Bessie and I have an understanding now," she replied with a small smile. "She doesn't kick, and I don't sing. Apparently, she finds my voice offensive." It was moments like these, small, domestic, tinged with humor, that made the situation feel unbearably precious. They both knew it couldn't last, this borrowed time, but neither spoke of it. The change between them had been gradual but undeniable. Where once they'd maintained careful distance, now their hands would brush as they passed dishes at dinner. Where silence had reigned, now they talked. About books, about dreams, about the small details that make up a life. And at night, when Rosalind's nightmares came, Elias would sit with her until she slept again, reading aloud from the few books he owned or simply being present in the darkness. One evening in early March, as snow began to melt and the first hints of spring touched the air, they sat by the fire after supper. Rosalind was darning socks while Elias cleaned his rifle, a nightly ritual that had taken on new meaning since learning about Marcus Blackwood's search. "I've been thinking," Rosalind said suddenly, "about what happens when this is over. When we've dealt with Marcus, cleared my name." Elias's hand stilled on the gun. "What about it?" "I'll be wealthy, Theodore's fortune, my father's business. I could go anywhere, do anything." She set down her darning, looking at him directly. "But I don't know if I want to anymore." The fire crackled between them. Elias set aside the rifle carefully. "What do you want?" "I used to dream of traveling. Paris, Rome, all the grand cities. I thought freedom meant motion, distance, escape." She paused, choosing her words. "But these past weeks, I've felt more free here, in this small house, than I ever did in Theodore's mansion. Is that strange?" "No," Elias said quietly. "It's not strange at all." She rose, moving to stand by the window where moonlight turned the snow-covered landscape into something from a fairy tale. "Sometimes I wonder what Mary would think about me being here, about us." Elias joined her at the window, close enough to feel her warmth. "Mary was practical above all else. She'd have wanted me to live, not just survive. And she'd have liked you, I think, your strength, your refusal to be broken." "I was broken," Rosalind whispered. "For a long time, I was nothing but pieces." "Were," he emphasized. Past tense. She turned to face him then, and the moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks. "Elias, I need to tell you something. That night, when I left Theodore—" "You don't have to." "I do." She took a shaky breath. "I put laudanum in his brandy. Not enough to kill, I thought, just enough to make him sleep deeply. But he had a weak heart, the doctor said later. And I knew he'd been having pains. So when I drugged him—" "You were defending yourself." "Was I? Or was I hoping?" The question hung between them like smoke. I've asked myself 1,000 times, did I know the dose might be too much for his heart? Did I secretly want— Elias caught her hands, feeling them tremble. "Listen to me. Whatever happened that night, whatever you intended or didn't intend, you were fighting for your life. That's not murder. That's survival. The law might not see it that way. Marcus certainly won't. Then we make sure the law sees the truth. All of it.
The beatings, the threats, the stolen inheritance. Ben Cooper is a fair man. He'll listen. She searched his face in the dim light. And if he doesn't, if Marcus has reached him first, paid him off, then we run. The words came without thought, straight from his heart. Together, north to Canada, west to California. Wherever we need to go, I won't let them take you. You'd give up your ranch, your home, everything Mary loved? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Mary loved this land. Yes, but more than that, she loved life. She believed in second chances, in making the most of whatever time we're given. She wouldn't want me to choose dead memories over a living future. Rosalind made a small, choked sound and swayed toward him. He caught her, pulled her close, and suddenly they were kissing, desperately, hungrily, as if trying to compress all their fear and hope and growing love into this one moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rosalind pressed her forehead to his chest. "I don't want to lose this," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," he promised, though they both knew it might be a lie. "Whatever comes, we face it together." That night, for the first time, she didn't return to Sam's room. They lay together fully clothed on his bed, holding each other in the darkness, finding comfort in simple proximity. Her head rested on his chest, and he stroked her hair as she finally told him everything, every detail of her marriage, every cruelty, every small rebellion that had kept her sane. "The worst part," she murmured as dawn approached, "was how he made me complicit, how he'd hurt me, then comfort me, until I was grateful for any kindness, until I believed I deserved it. You didn't. I know that now. Here, with you, I remember who I was before him, who I might be again." She lifted her head to look at him. "Is it wrong that I'm grateful? That despite everything, I'm glad I was sent here? If it's wrong, then I'm guilty too." He traced her face gently. "I was dying here. Rosalind, not my body, but everything else. You brought me back to life as much as I saved yours." They dozed as the sun rose, wrapped in each other in the fragile peace they'd built. But peace, Elias knew, was always temporary in the territories. The real test was coming, and when it did, they'd need more than love to survive it. 3 days later, as if summoned by their fears, Sheriff Cooper appeared on the ridge above the ranch. He wasn't alone. 2 other riders flanked him, their presence turning a friendly visit into something official. Elias met them in the yard, rifle prominently displayed, though not aimed. "Ben, gentlemen, Elias." Ben's face was carefully neutral. "These men are Pinkerton agents, hired by the Blackwood estate. They're looking for someone. Thought you might have seen her, woman named Rosalind Blackwood." "Can't say I have," Elias replied evenly. "What's she wanted for?" One of the Pinkertons, a thin man with cold eyes, spoke up. "Murder of her husband, theft of valuable documents. There's a substantial reward." "That's so? Well, I'll keep an eye out. Don't get many strangers here, though." The thin man's eyes swept the property, lingering on the house where smoke rose from the chimney. "Mind if we look around, just to be thorough?" "I do mind," Elias said, his voice hardening. "This is private property. You want to search it, you get a warrant." "Now, Elias." Ben started, but Elias cut him off. "No, I know my rights. These men have no authority here without proper papers." He looked directly at Ben. "Unless you're telling me the law's changed since yesterday?" Ben sighed. "No, it hasn't." He turned to the Pinkertons. "You heard the man. We'll need to do this properly." The thin Pinkerton smiled coldly. "We'll be back, Mr. Hartwell, with papers, and when we find her, and we will find her, anyone hiding her will be charged as an accomplice to murder." They left, but Elias knew they'd return. He found Rosalind in the kitchen, pale but composed. She'd heard everything. "It's time," she said simply. "I won't let you be arrested for protecting me." "We stick to the plan. Ben's a good man. He brought them here openly. Could have snuck them in. That's a message. He's giving us time." "Time for what?"
to get our evidence in order, to make our case. He pulled her close. To fight back with the truth. That night, they made love for the first time, not desperately or fearfully, but with a tender intensity born of the knowledge that every moment might be their last together. In the darkness, skin against skin, they spoke with touch what words couldn't convey. Every kiss was a promise, every caress a claim against an uncertain future. Afterward, as Rosalind lay sleeping in his arms, Elias stared at the ceiling and made his own plans. The Pinkertons would return, probably within days. When they did, he and Rosalind would be ready, not to run, but to stand and fight, because some things were worth the risk, and the woman breathing softly against his chest was worth everything. The cold night that had brought her to him knew her secrets, had sheltered her escape. Now, as spring approached with its promise of renewal, they would see if love and truth were enough to overcome the shadows of the past. Whatever happened, Elias thought as sleep finally took him, they would face it as they'd learned to face everything, together. The Pinkertons returned 3 days later, just as the dawn was breaking over the mountains. This time they brought more than papers. They brought a small army, 6 men in total, including the 2 agents, Sheriff Cooper, his deputy, and 2 men Elias didn't recognize, but whose bearing marked them as hired guns. Rosalind stood beside him on the porch, wearing her traveling dress, the carpetbag at her feet. They'd spent the night preparing, organizing the documents, writing out her statement, making peace with whatever was to come. "Mr. Hartwell," the thin Pinkerton called out, holding up a paper. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Rosalind Blackwood, and authorization to search these premises. Stand aside." "No need to search," Elias said calmly. "She's right here." Rosalind stepped forward, her chin raised despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm Rosalind Blake Blackwood, and I'm prepared to answer your charges, but not here. I want a proper hearing. In town. With witnesses." The Pinkerton smiled coldly. "You'll get a hearing, Mrs. Blackwood, back in Philadelphia, after we deliver you to stand trial for murder. Now, hold on." Sheriff Cooper interjected. "If she's willing to come peacefully, we should hear her out. This is my jurisdiction." "Not anymore," the second Pinkerton said, producing another document. "Federal warrant. Sheriff, this is our matter now." Elias felt Rosalind tense beside him. They'd known this was a possibility, but knowing and facing it were different things. He placed a protective hand on her back. "Ben," Elias said, looking directly at the sheriff, "you know me. You knew Mary. I'm asking you, as a friend. Let her tell her story, here in front of everyone. After that, if you still think she needs to go to Philadelphia, we won't resist." Ben Cooper studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Seems fair. A person's got a right to speak in their own defense." The thin Pinkerton started to protest, but Ben held up a hand. "This is still my town. Gentlemen, we do things properly here. Mrs. Blackwood, say your piece." Rosalind took a deep breath, then began. Her voice started soft but grew stronger as she spoke, telling the story she'd told Elias, the forced marriage, the beatings, the theft of her inheritance. She showed them the bruises, faded now but still visible. She produced the letters, Theodore's own words condemning him. "I did put laudanum in his brandy that night," she said clearly. "I wanted him unconscious so I could escape. I didn't know about his heart condition. He'd hidden it, along with so much else. But even if I had known..." She paused, meeting each man's eyes in turn. "Even if I had known, I would have done the same. Because it was that or die myself. Slowly, piece by piece." When she finished, silence stretched across the yard. Even the hired guns looked uncomfortable, but the thin Pinkerton just shrugged. "A touching story, ma'am. You can tell it again to a Philadelphia jury." "Wait," Elias said. "There's more." He produced the final document, the one they discovered just the night before, hidden in the lining of Rosalind's carpetbag. A letter in Theodore Blackwood's hand, dated the day before his death, outlining his plans to have Rosalind committed to an asylum and declaring her insane so he could fully control her inheritance. He was going to lock her away, Elias said flatly. Bury her alive in some hellhole while he spent her father's money. Is it any wonder she ran? Ben Cooper took the letter. Read it carefully. His face darkened with each line. This changes things, he said slowly. It changes nothing. The thin Pinkerton snapped. She's admitted to drugging him. That's murder, regardless of the reason. Is it? A new voice spoke from the edge of the gathering. Everyone turned to see an elderly man in a fine black suit dismounting from an expensive carriage that had approached unnoticed. He walked with a silver-headed cane, but moved with surprising vigor. "Who the hell are you?" the Pinkerton demanded. The old man smiled. "Dr. Josiah Weatherby, of Philadelphia. I was Theodore Blackwood's personal physician." He looked at Rosalind with kind eyes. "Hello, my dear. I'm sorry it took so long to find you." Rosalind gasped. "Dr. Weatherby, but how?" "I've been looking for you since Theodore's death. You see, gentlemen, I have some information that may interest you." He pulled out his own documents. "Theodore Blackwood was dying. Had been for months. Weak heart, aggravated by his excessive drinking and violent tempers. I told him repeatedly he had perhaps 6 months to live." The yard erupted in voices. Ben Cooper raised his hand for silence. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying that Theodore Blackwood would have died that night regardless. The amount of laudanum misses Blackwood admits to giving him wouldn't have killed a healthy man. It merely hastened by hours what was already inevitable." The doctor looked at the Pinkertons sternly. "Moreover, I have here signed statements from household servants detailing Mr. Blackwood's treatment of his wife, beatings, threats, forced confinement. Any court would call her action self-defense." The thin Pinkerton's face had gone red. "You can't prove any of this, and who's to say you're even who you claim?" "I am," another voice interrupted. Marcus Blackwood himself rode into the yard, his face twisted with fury. "Doctor, Weatherby was my brother's physician, and he's lying to protect this murderous witch." Elias stepped protectively in front of Rosalind as Marcus dismounted. The man was younger than Theodore had been, but had the same cruel cast to his features. "She killed him," Marcus snarled. "Killed him and ran with documents that belong to the family. I want her arrested and hanged." "The documents belong to me," Rosalind said quietly but firmly. "My father's will, proving Theodore married me for my inheritance. Papers showing your family's criminal dealings. Yes, Marcus, I have those too. How you and Theodore embezzled from your investors, bribed judges, destroyed competitors." Marcus lunged toward her, but Elias caught him, spinning him around and shoving him back. "Touch her, and it'll be the last thing you do," he growled. "Enough." Sheriff Cooper stepped between them. "Everyone calm down." He looked at Dr. Weatherby. "You'll swear to what you've said? In court?" "Gladly. I've kept silent too long, watching that family destroy lives." The doctor moved to stand beside Rosalind. "This young woman deserves justice, not persecution." Ben nodded slowly, then turned to the Pinkertons. "Gentlemen, I think we need to reconsider this situation. Seems to me there's reasonable doubt about any murder charge. And given the circumstances—" "You're making a mistake, Sheriff," the thin Pinkerton warned. "The Blackwood family has resources. Influence? Not in Wyoming territory, they don't." Ben replied firmly. "Out here, we judge a person by their actions, not their bank account." He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you and these agents head back to town. We'll sort this out properly, with lawyers and judges, not guns and threats." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over." He spat at Rosalind. "You're my brother's widow. That means your family property. I'll see you back in Philadelphia if I have to drag you there myself." "Try it," Elias said quietly, and something in his voice made Marcus step back. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Ben Cooper drew his pistol, not aiming at anyone but making his position clear. "Everyone's leaving now. Peacefully, Mrs.
Blackwood will come to town voluntarily tomorrow to give her statement. Dr. Weatherby, I'd appreciate you staying as a material witness. Slowly, reluctantly, the group dispersed. Marcus was the last to leave, his eyes promising retribution. As the dust settled, Rosalind sagged against Elias, who caught her easily. "It's not over," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But you're not alone in it anymore." Dr. Weatherby approached them, his aged face kind. "My dear, I must apologize. I should have acted sooner, spoken up about Theodore's treatment of you. But I was a coward, afraid of the family's power. You're here now," Rosalind said simply. "That's what matters." The doctor smiled sadly. "I wasn't the one who arranged your escape, you know, but whoever did, they chose well." He looked at Elias approvingly. "Take care of her, young man. She's stronger than she knows, but she's been through enough." That evening, as they prepared for the next day's ordeal, Rosalind finally asked the question that had haunted her. "Do you think I murdered him, Elias? In my heart, if not by law?" He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her hair. "I think you survived, and I think Theodore Blackwood killed himself, with cruelty, with violence, with drink. You just refused to let him take you with him." She was quiet for a long moment. "I love you," she said simply. "I should have said it before, but I was afraid it would curse us somehow. But if tomorrow goes badly, tomorrow will go however it goes." He interrupted. "But nothing changes this. Nothing changes us." He tilted her face up to his. "I love you too, Rosalind. Have since almost the beginning. I think since you stood in my doorway like a lost angel and reminded me I still had a heart to break." They made love slowly that night, memorizing each other with touch and taste and whispered promises. Outside, the cold night wind sang through the valleys, the same wind that had brought her to him. But inside, they created their own warmth, their own shelter against whatever storms were coming. Because storms were definitely coming. Marcus Blackwood wouldn't give up easily, and the law was still uncertain. But for tonight, they had each other, and the truth, and the strange providence that had brought a frightened woman to a grieving man's door. Tomorrow, they would fight. Tonight, they loved. The hearing in Cedar Ridge drew more spectators than the small courthouse had ever held. Word had spread like wildfire. A beautiful Eastern woman, a mysterious death, powerful men from Philadelphia, and their own Elias Hartwell standing against them all. By the time Judge Abraham Foster gavelled the proceedings to order, people were crowding the windows and doorway. Rosalind sat between Elias and Dr. Weatherby, her back straight despite the weight of dozens of staring eyes. She'd worn her best dress, a deep blue that Mary had probably saved for church, and her hair was pinned up properly. But it was the steadiness in her gaze that struck Elias most. The frightened woman who'd arrived in a snowstorm had found her courage. Marcus Blackwood sat across the aisle with his lawyers, two sharp-dressed men from Denver who'd arrived that morning. The Pinkerton agents flanked them, their presence a reminder that this was more than a local matter. Judge Foster, a weathered man in his 60s who'd seen everything the frontier could offer, looked over his spectacles at the assembled crowd. "This is a hearing, not a trial," he said firmly. "I'll decide today whether Mrs. Blackwood should be held for trial or released. I'll have order, or I'll clear this courtroom." The territory prosecutor, a young man named James Garrett, stood first. "Your Honor, we have a complicated situation. Mrs. Blackwood has admitted to administering laudanum to her husband the night he died. However, new evidence suggests nothing." One of Marcus's lawyers interrupted, rising. "The woman has confessed to poisoning Theodore Blackwood. Everything else is smoke and mirrors designed to—" Judge Foster's gavel cracked down. "Sir, you'll wait your turn. Continue, Mr. Garrett." For the next hour, the basic facts were laid out. Rosalind's admission, the circumstances of her marriage, Theodore's death. Then Dr. Weatherby took the stand, and his testimony changed everything. "Theodore Blackwood was my patient for 8 years, the doctor said clearly. In the last year, I treated him for a serious heart condition, made worse by his drinking and violent tempers. I warned him repeatedly that any shock to his system could be fatal. Did you inform his wife of this condition? Garrett asked. No, Mr. Blackwood specifically forbade me. He didn't want anyone to know of his weakness, as he called it. He was particularly concerned that his wife not find out.
Why was that?
Doctor, Weatherby's face darkened. Because he was planning to have her committed to an asylum. He needed her declared mentally incompetent so he could control her inheritance completely. If she'd known about his heart condition, she might have used it in her defense. The crowd murmured. Judge Foster called for silence. Dr. Weatherby, Marcus's lawyer said when his turn came. Isn't it true that you've been retired for 2 years? That your medical license was questioned due to your age? I retired by choice. The doctor replied with dignity. And my license was never in question, though I'm sure you already knew that. The lawyer pressed on, trying to discredit the doctor, but Weatherby held firm. When Rosalind herself took the stand, the courthouse fell silent. She told her story simply, without embellishment. The forced marriage, the beatings, the theft of her inheritance, the night she ran. Her voice broke only once, when she described finding her father's hidden will. He took everything, she said quietly. My freedom, my inheritance, my dignity. That night, I took it back. I put laudanum in his brandy because I knew it was the only way he wouldn't follow me. I didn't know about his heart, but even if I had, even if you had, Garrett prompted gently. Rosalind lifted her chin.
I would have run anyway, because staying meant dying, just more slowly.
Marcus's lawyer tried to tear her story apart, but Rosalind held steady. When he produced Theodore's letters proclaiming his love for her, she produced her own evidence, the bruises documented by Dr. Weatherby, the threatening letters, the fraudulent documents. Your husband was a respected businessman, the lawyer insisted, a pillar of Philadelphia society. He was a monster. Rosalind said simply, and everyone in that society knew it. They just chose to look away. Then came the surprise witness. Sheriff Cooper called a name no one expected. Mrs. Dorothy Henshaw. A middle-aged woman in traveling clothes entered, looking nervous but determined. Elias didn't recognize her, but Rosalind gasped softly. State your name and occupation. Judge Foster instructed. Dorothy Henshaw. I was the Blackwood family's housekeeper for 15 years, until 3 months ago. Why did you leave their employment? The woman's eyes found Rosalind. Because I couldn't stand to work for Mr. Marcus after what happened, after he celebrated his brother's death. The courtroom erupted. Judge Foster hammered for order while Marcus shot to his feet, shouting denials. When quiet was restored, Mrs. Henshaw continued. The night Mr. Theodore died. I was in the house. I saw Mrs. Blackwood leave. She was terrified, hurt. Her face was bruised, her dress torn. After she left, I went to check on Mr. Theodore. He was unconscious but breathing. I was going to call for the doctor when Mr. Marcus arrived. What happened then? Garrett asked. Mrs. Henshaw took a deep breath. Mr. Marcus told me to leave, said he'd handle it. I waited in the kitchen, worried. An hour later, he came down and said his brother was dead. He was smiling. Objection, Marcus's lawyer shouted. This is hearsay, speculation. It's testimony from a witness. Judge Foster said firmly. Continue, Mrs. Henshaw. Mr. Marcus had me help him search Mr. Theodore's study. He was looking for documents. He said business papers. But I saw what he took. Mr. Theodore's will, the new one, that left everything to Mrs. Rosalind. He burned it in the fireplace. She's lying, Marcus roared. This woman was dismissed for theft. I have the will, Mrs. Henshaw said quietly, reaching into her bag. The one he burned was a copy. Mr. Theodore kept the original in a different place. I saved it, thinking someday Mrs. Rosalind might need it. She produced a document.
sealed and witnessed. Judge Foster examined it carefully, then passed it to the lawyers. Marcus's face had gone from red to white. "There's more. Mrs." Henshaw continued. Marcus knew about Mr. Theodore's heart condition. They'd argued that day about money. Marcus wanted a bigger share of the family business. Theodore refused. Marcus said, and I quote, "Your heart won't last forever, brother. And when it gives out, I'll take what should have been mine." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Foster looked at Marcus, whose lawyers were frantically whispering to him. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said sternly, "do you have anything to say to these allegations?" "Lies," Marcus sputtered. "All lies. This woman, my brother's wife, she's turned everyone against me." "Enough." Judge Foster's voice cut through like a blade. "I've heard sufficient testimony to make my decision." Everyone held their breath as the judge organized his thoughts. "Mrs. Blackwood," he began, "you've admitted to administering laudanum to your husband. Under normal circumstances, that would be a serious crime. However, these are far from normal circumstances." He looked around the courtroom. "The evidence shows a pattern of abuse, theft, and fraud perpetrated by Theodore Blackwood against his wife. It shows she acted in desperate self-defense, fleeing a man who had already stolen her inheritance and was planning to steal her freedom entirely. Furthermore," his eyes found Marcus, "there are now questions about who actually bears responsibility for Theodore Blackwood's death. Mrs. Henshaw's testimony suggests that Marcus Blackwood may have had both motive and opportunity to ensure his brother didn't survive that night." Marcus started to protest, but his lawyers pulled him down. "Therefore," Judge Foster concluded, "I find no grounds to hold Mrs. Rosalind Blackwood for trial. She is free to go. As for Mr. Marcus Blackwood, I'm ordering Sheriff Cooper to investigate the circumstances of Theodore Blackwood's death more thoroughly, with particular attention to Marcus Blackwood's actions that night." The gavel came down with finality. The courtroom erupted. Cheers from the locals who'd come to support Elias, shouts of outrage from Marcus and his men. In the chaos, Elias pulled Rosalind into his arms, feeling her sob against his chest, tears of relief, of vindication, of freedom. "It's over," she whispered. "This part is," he corrected, watching as Sheriff Cooper approached Marcus with his deputies. "But our part is just beginning." They left the courthouse hand in hand, walking through the crowd that parted respectfully. Some nodded approval. Some offered congratulations. Mrs. Henshaw caught up with them on the steps. "I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner," she said to Rosalind. "I was frightened, but when I heard they were hunting you..." Rosalind embraced the older woman. "You came when it mattered most. Thank you." As they climbed into Elias's wagon for the ride home, Rosalind looked back at the courthouse where her old life had officially ended. "I'm free," she said, as if testing the words. "You are," Elias confirmed, taking up the reins. "Question is, what do you want to do with that freedom?" She looked at him, and her smile was radiant. "Take me home, Elias. Take me home so we can start living." As they drove out of town, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, warming their faces. Behind them, Marcus Blackwood's curses faded into nothing. Ahead lay the ranch, the mountains, and a future they could finally build together without shadows. The scared woman who'd arrived in a snowstorm was gone. In her place sat Rosalind Hartwell, for that's who she would be soon enough. A woman who'd faced her demons and won. And beside her, Elias felt his own heart finishing its long thaw, ready to love and be loved again. They'd won more than a legal victory today. They'd won the right to their happiness. And that, Elias thought as he guided the horses toward home, was worth every fight they'd faced to get it. Spring came to Wyoming like a shy bride, hesitant at first, then blooming with sudden glory. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, leaving behind meadows dotted with wildflowers. The ranch that had been a frozen fortress all winter now hummed with life. New calves in the pasture, birds nesting in the eaves. And in the garden Rosalind had planted, the first green shoots pushing through the dark soil. A year had passed since that cold night when a stranger's wagon had delivered her to Elias's door. Now, as she stood on the porch watching him work with the horses, Rosalind could hardly recognize the frightened woman she'd been. Her hands, once soft from city living, bore the calluses of honest work. Her face, once pale with fear, glowed with sun and happiness. "Mrs. Hartwell!" a young voice called from the road. "Mrs. Hartwell, are you ready?" Rosalind smiled as Tommy Morrison, the store owner's youngest, came running up the path. She'd been teaching him and 5 other local children their letters twice a week, using the old kitchen table as a schoolroom. "Almost ready. Tommy, tell the others to wash their hands at the pump first." Teaching had started as a way to contribute to the community that had embraced her, but it had become something more. These children, eager and wild as the land itself, had helped heal parts of her she hadn't known were still broken. Elias appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. The sight of him still made her heart skip. This quiet, strong man who'd given her shelter and then his heart. They'd married quietly 3 months after the trial, with Sheriff Cooper officiating and Dr. Weatherby giving her away. No grand ceremony, just promises made before friends who'd become family. "School day already?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Wednesday," she confirmed. "Will you be back for lunch?" "Wouldn't miss it. Sarah Cooper promised to bring that apple pie recipe you wanted." As the children gathered for their lessons, Rosalind felt the now familiar flutter in her belly. She hadn't told Elias yet, wanting to be sure, but all the signs were there. New life growing where death had once held dominion. Dr. Weatherby, who'd stayed in Cedar Ridge to start a practice. "Philadelphia has doctors aplenty," he'd said, "but these people need me." Would confirm it soon enough. The morning passed in a blur of spelling words and arithmetic. Young voices reciting lessons while spring sunshine streamed through the windows. When the children left, clutching their primers and chalk slates, Rosalind found Elias had returned early, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a thoughtful expression. "Letter came," he said, sliding an envelope across to her. "From Philadelphia." Her heart clenched automatically, though she knew Marcus Blackwood could no longer hurt them. He was serving time in prison for fraud and suspicion of murder. The investigation had uncovered more than anyone expected about his business dealings and his role in Theodore's death. But the letter bore official seals. She opened it with steady hands. Elias moving to stand behind her, reading over her shoulder. "The estate is settled," she breathed. "Theodore's creditors have been paid, the fraudulent dealings unwound, and what remains?" She set down the letter with shaking hands. "Elias, it's more than I thought, much more." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" She turned in her chair to look up at him. "What do you mean?" "It's enough to go anywhere, do anything. You could have that grand tour of Europe. You could live in San Francisco, New York. You could—" She stopped him with a finger to his lips. "Elias Hartwell, are you trying to get rid of me?" "Never. But I want you to choose this life because you want it, not because you have no other options." She stood, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I had no options when I came here. Now I have all the options in the world. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose teaching farm children their letters and fighting with your ornery milk cow and watching the mountains change color with the seasons. Even when winter comes again, when we're snowed in for weeks. Especially then." She murmured against his chest. "Though we might need to expand the house." He pulled back to look at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Rosalind, I haven't seen Dr. Weatherby yet, but I'm fairly certain. October, I think." The joy that transformed his face was worth all the dark roads that had led to this moment. He spun her around, both of them laughing, and when he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost my chance at this," he said roughly. "After marrying Sam, I thought that part of my life was over." "Nothing's ever really over," Rosalind said, thinking of all the endings that had become beginnings. "It just changes shape." That evening, They sat on the porch as they often did, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The ranch spread before them, not grand, but theirs. In the distance, Sheriff Cooper's wagon approached, bringing his wife Sarah for their weekly dinner together. The Coopers had become their closest friends, and Sarah's gentle wisdom had helped Rosalind navigate her new life. "I've been thinking about that night," Rosalind said quietly. "The night I arrived. What about it? Who do you think he was? The old man who arranged everything?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I used to wonder. Spent months trying to figure it out. But then I realized it doesn't matter." "No?" "Guardian angel, clever stranger, ghost of Christmas past, whoever he was. He saw two broken people who needed each other, and he made it happen." He took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring. "I'm grateful, whoever he was. Mrs. Henshaw thinks it was fate." Rosalind mused. "That some things are meant to be, and the universe finds a way. Maybe, or maybe kindness is just more common than we think, showing up when we need it most." The Cooper wagon pulled into the yard, and soon the house filled with voices and laughter. Sarah immediately noticed Rosalind's glow and pulled her aside with knowing eyes and whispered congratulations. Ben regaled them with stories from town, including news that the territorial government was planning to build a proper schoolhouse. "They'll need a teacher," Sarah said, eyeing Rosalind meaningfully. "Someone with experience, patience, and proper learning." "I'd like that," Rosalind admitted, "though I'll have my hands full come fall." As their friends prepared to leave, Ben took Elias aside. "Got word from the federal marshals. That Blackwood business is officially closed. No one's going to bother you folks again." "Good to know." "Also," Ben's eyes twinkled, "Judge Foster asked me to tell you he's never seen a finer example of frontier justice. Said it restored his faith in the system." After the Coopers left, Elias and Rosalind cleaned up together, moving in the comfortable rhythm of a couple who'd learned each other's ways. As they prepared for bed, Rosalind paused by the window of what had been Sam's room, soon to be a nursery again. "I want to keep some of Sam's things," she said softly. "That wooden horse you carved, the quilt Mary made. This baby should know about the brother who came before." Elias moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her still flat belly. "You continually amaze me. You know that?" "Because I want to honor your first family. Because you understand that love multiplies. It doesn't divide, that there's room in our hearts for all of it, the past, the present, what's to come." That night, as spring rain began to fall softly on the roof, they lay entwined, making quiet plans. The money from Philadelphia would go toward improving the ranch, building the school, helping their neighbors. They'd create something lasting here, something worth passing on. "Are you happy?" Elias asked in the darkness. Rosalind thought of the journey that had brought her here, the terror, the flight, the cold night that had hidden her escape. She thought of Theodore's cruelty and Marcus's greed, of trials and uncertainty. But mostly she thought of this man, this land, this life growing inside her, this future stretching out like the prairie, vast and full of possibility. "Yes," she said simply, "completely." Outside, the rain washed the world clean, preparing the earth for new growth. A wildflower had found its way through a crack in the porch steps, delicate but determined, beautiful in its resilience. Rosalind had noticed it that morning, how it reached toward the sun despite the odds against it. Tomorrow she would show it to Elias. Tomorrow she would teach eager children, tend her garden, feel new life quicken within her. Tomorrow she would continue building this unexpected, precious life. But tonight, safe in the arms of the man who'd offered shelter to a stranger and found love instead, she simply rested. The cold night that had known her secrets, that had delivered her to safety, was just a memory now. What remained was warmth and hope, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the most broken roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. In the old wooden house that had learned to be a home again, two hearts beat in rhythm with the rain,
writing their own ending to a story that had begun in fear but found its way, against all odds, to joy. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Wyoming wilderness and matters of the heart. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of frontier love, courage, and redemption. Share your thoughts about Elias and Rosalind's story. What touched your heart? What surprised you? Or what reminded you that love can bloom even in the harshest winters? Until next time, partners, keep your fires burning bright and your hearts open to unexpected possibilities.